beautiful day to you, and a beautiful eternity too, because you are the stuff that eternity is made of, as am I. I am Astarius Miraculii, and today I am here to share with you some insight into Mercury retrograde. There's some very interesting things that occur when the planet Mercury goes retrograde, and this is the 26th of June 2013, and today the planet Mercury has went retrograde. Many of you are aware of the Mercury retrograde cycle and the unusual things that tend to happen during a Mercury retrograde, and it is an honor to share this with you, and also particularly because I've not shared a video on my astrological insights. I've shared in many other subjects, but not on the astrology, and actually astrology is my oldest modality. I've been a professional astrologer now for 30 years. So anyway, let's get into some of the resonance of what this is all about, and the subject is actually Mercury retrograde and other key astrological influences, that this information would be helpful in some ways, give you some insight and give you some means to be empowered in a cycle that can sometimes be very challenging for people. Some people have a kind of a negative outlook as to Mercury retrograde, largely because things can slide out of the norm. Mercury is the planet of logistics. It has to do with planning and structuring and communication and methodology and things of that nature. And when Mercury retrograde happens, the energetics begin to turn inward. And Mercury goes retrograde about 3 times a year, and it's a cycle of anywhere from 21 to 25 days. This particular Mercury retrograde went retrograde at 23 degrees of Cancer, and it will go direct on July the 20th. That will be the completion of the cycle, but then there's a shadow phase, meaning that when Mercury goes direct, the shadow phase is that time that it takes for it to get to the actual point where it initially went retrograde. And so the receding shadow of Mercury retrograde will extend itself from the 20th of July until the 4th of August. And so we'll be dealing with the intensity of it between now and the 26th, between now and the 20th of July, and then a little more to deal with, but with less intensity, extending to the 4th of August. So with Mercury being in the sign of Cancer, we're going to have to address things that are rooted at the emotional level. This will really be a time of experiencing the emotional body. The emotional body will be in communication with us. Many times people are quite skilled at pushing their feelings down, but during this cycle there's no escaping the feeling aspect. And in our society, we're not really taught to feel the resonance of safety associated with feelings. The average person starts, or someone starts to cry, and the average person says, "Don't cry," and the pretense is, "I really care about you, don't cry," when in actuality they're saying, "You're making me very uncomfortable, would you stop crying?" So we live in a society that tends to try to steer us away from being a feeling being. In our society, at least over here in this Western Hemisphere, the emphasis is so strongly focused upon the intellect and the mind. We don't have feelings 101 or something like that in our school system. And so this particular Mercury retrograde cycle is going to teach us a great deal about who we are at the feeling level. This one is going to be a very strong emotional trigger. The sign Cancer has so much to do with family, so there's going to be a lot of triggered energy that is associated with family. Some of it will be triggered, in the current moment, and some of it will be a triggering of those things that are unresolved around painful family issues from the past. Cancer also rules mother, so there's a lot of energies that will be dealt with relative to the mothering energy, the nurturing energy. How do you feel about nurturing? What kind of a nurturer are you? And do you get your nurturing needs met? The emphasis is going to be so strong, on all of this. We're living in times where we must learn to really be at resonance with our feeling nature, because our feelings are our access code to source, our access code to God. We access God through our feelings, not through our mind. We may be able to use the mind to articulate what the experience was after the fact, but the actual experience of God, of source, happens through the feeling nature. And so our feelings are very experiential. We experience through them. They are an access code to concrete realities. During this Mercury retrograde, we'll also be tapping more deeply into our psychic nature, to psychically and intuitively plug into things more easily. And it will be a time of being more empathic, where we feel the feelings of other people, their joys, their pains, their sorrows. Now, when we come across the more challenging energies of these times, it's really important to see those energies, as an opportunity to use the fertilizer of life. Now, when fertilizer is used in an actual sense, it's waste material, it's dung, and it's placed on the soil, and the soil yields richer crops, not in spite of the fertilizer, the waste, but because of the fertilizer, because of the waste. So the process of fertilizing teaches us how to take something that would normally be wasteful and to create something fruitful out of that. And so that's what I encourage you to take, or the attitude I encourage you to take to this Mercury retrograde cycle, is realizing that it is wise not to despise it. Use the dung to fertilize it, for life's greatest connoisseur gets the best crops from the best manure. And so don't let it get you down if things seem to be a little bit off center during this particular cycle. Things turn very much inward when we're in a Mercury retrograde cycle. Things don't work in the way that we would like them to always externally, because we need to turn our attention inwardly. And in this particular case, because of it being in the sign of Cancer, inwardly, especially relative to our feeling nature, our relationship with family, our relationship with mother, our relationship with the mothering principle inside of our own self. It may be a time where we must address some resentment. Sometimes we've experienced very painful situations from mother, and there's something to heal. Sometimes there's resentment that is there. And it's really important to heal that resentment, because resentment is not receptive, and we must be receptive in order to learn the lessons that painful situations have to teach us. Otherwise, we get caught in the spider web of cyclicity, and we have to keep doing it over and over and over again until we learn what is to be learned. So this is a time of really going deeper into emotional honesty. I'm talking about sacred guts on the table, holding nothing back, bringing it all forward, and doing so in such a way where you're not attacking other beings or blaming other beings or anything of that nature, but just bringing it out, what it is that is being dealt with at this particular time in your life. So it's very powerful, this Mercury retrograde cycle that we're dealing with. Now, another thing I'd like to speak with you about, and actually before I go to the next thing, let me just offer a tone for the healing and the balancing of any of the uncentered energies associated with Mercury retrograde. We can always bring the resonance of sound into play in order to balance energies. So now I want to speak with you about the planet Saturn, which is in the sign of Scorpio right now, and we have about another 2 years to deal with this energy. Saturn is the planet that relates to career, to work, to responsibility, to duty, and all of those things. And in the sign of Scorpio, which is the sign of death, regeneration, and transformation, there is this great wave of change and transformation that is taking place in the area of career for so many people. Many people are looking at things that they've been doing for a very long period of time that maybe are no longer working, no longer feel good. It feels like a violation of the true integrity of one's own being, because there's really the desire to maybe do something else. So, the death of career matters. This is something that is really strongly in play. The death of outlived duties, relative to whatever our work might happen to be. So this is a really important time to look at what are the ways in which the work needs to change. And are you doing those things which really reflect your heart's desire? Or are you engaged in work that is like an unsacred yes because you're not doing it with fullness of heart? It would be far better to say to say the sacred no rather than to say the unsacred yes. So don't say yes to something that you're not able to say yes to with fullness of heart relative to the things of career. This is an extremely powerful time with Saturn being in Scorpio and then Pluto in Capricorn. Now, Saturn is the natural ruler of Capricorn, Pluto is the natural ruler of Scorpio, so it's kind of like a double whammy. It's the death of third dimensional consciousness. When we look at Pluto being in the sign of Capricorn, which we'll be dealing with Pluto in Capricorn until about the beginning of 2024. So we've got some time to actually be dealing with this. Capricorn also has a strong association with government, and we do see a tremendous amount of governmental breakdown. A lot of things are just falling apart with regards to certain governments, a great many governments, largely because of the legalized gangsterism, the bureaucratic bullying, the ways in which government has been taking advantage of the populace. We're moving towards what I like to call a peopleocracy, where there is a governing energy that will begin to move through the masses, that operates from a place of balance and from a place of win-win. It's a process that we have to go through. However, because the things that are going through the transformational death process are things that we've been accustomed to for a very long time, even though they may not be working for our highest benefit, because we are so used to them and they're so habitual, we may tend to associate safety with familiarity because we're simply familiar with them, but they're not necessarily safe. So big changes taking place at this time in our lives relative to Saturn in Scorpio as well as Pluto in Capricorn. And when Saturn is in Scorpio, it's like structure having to filter through death. Whereas with Pluto and Capricorn, it's death having to filter through structure. So, on both ends, there is a breaking down of those things that do not work in our benefit. So these are Pluto is a really heavy duty astrological energy, because it stays in a sign for such a long period of time, and therefore its impact is very long and deep and powerful. So one of the things that you can do with regards to the planet Pluto is be in meditation with Pluto, where you inhale benevolent Pluto and exhale. In my case, I would exhale sacred Astarius. Inhale benevolent Pluto, exhale sacred Astarius. I begin to trade breath with the planet Pluto, and also being in the recognition that Pluto is an extension of my own self. That's the part of me who is Pluto. So whatever that planet is doing is an external representation of something that exists inside of my own soul and inside of your own soul. So there's nothing out there making things happen. What's out there is simply a mirrored reflection of that which exists inside of our being. Just like going to see a movie, and you're sitting and you're watching the movie. So the question is the movie on the screen, or is the movie in the projector? Well, in reality, the movie is in the projector, yet we experience the movie on the screen. Just like, I am part of your movie in this moment, and I am on the screen of your life in this moment. And yet the reality of who I am is generated from the internal projector of your being. And what you're seeing here is a mirrored reflection of that which occurs inside of you, because the whole of my adventure, is something that is also recorded at the cellular level inside of you. Just like the whole of your adventure is something that is recorded at the cellular level inside of me. We each have a cell within us for every being in the whole of the universe. Each one of us are the microcosmic container of the macrocosmic universal all that is. And the Plutonian energy is very powerful to help bring us into resonance with that energy. Pluto, aside from being the planet of death, it is also the planet of ascension. Oftentimes, to experience the ascension into the higher realms of spirit, we die to the flesh. We lay down the body and then take the spirit upwards into the celestial realms. And so we learn a lot about the frequency of ascension through the planet Pluto. While Pluto is in Capricorn, we'll be learning a lot also about the all or nothing of life. Pluto in its shadow expression represents all or nothing. So we must learn how to maximize the minimum, how to have a maximum appreciation for something that is only minimally intended or minimally allowed. But when we maximize the minimum, the next thing we know, the minimum becomes the maximum. So it's a very powerful thing, to do. So utilize Pluto as a means of gaining deeper insight to the ascension, deeper insight into the unnecessary aspects of your being that are needing to die away. With Saturn in Scorpio, the shadow expression is the temptation to invalidate self. Whatever you accomplish in life, I don't care how small it seems to be, you want to maximize the minimum. Get your magnifying glass out and maximize the minimum so that the minimum can become the maximum. So you must validate your accomplishments. Self-validation is the salary that you pay yourself for doing your life, and it is not kind to work for yourself without pay. So be in acknowledgement of yourself for that which you accomplish, which then creates a wonderful alignment with you and your inner child, which is the most capable part of your being. If you say, well, where's the God self inside of us? It's the inner child. That's why the major scriptures always say, lest ye become as a little child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. We think of our children as our offspring, and relative to the propagation of the species, that's true. Yet when we look at the evolvement of any human life, what we see is that we are children first, and that who we are as an adult then becomes the offspring of that. So the child that we were has given birth to the adult that we are. So the most infinite, capable part of our being is the inner child. When you don't validate yourself for your accomplishments, you create a fracture in your relationship with your inner child. And it doesn't offer all of this magic to you because it feels like it's not being acknowledged by you. So make sure you're taking the time to be acknowledging of yourself. That's one of the key lessons relative to both Saturn in Scorpio as well as Pluto in Capricorn. Because there's the tendency or the temptation to invalidate self or invalidate the accomplishments of self. So here's a tone to help balance the frequencies of Pluto in Capricorn and Saturn in Scorpio. Now I'd like to speak with you about Neptune in Pisces, which is going to be there until March of 2025. So that's a while too. Neptune is very celestial, very non-physical. Neptune in Pisces is an indication that we're really feeling the call home to our celestial reality. And this is also a process of dematerialization of consciousness, or the dematerialization of our consciousness that is solely focused upon things of the physical. You know, we're being prompted now to look larger. With Neptune in Pisces, we're much more empathic these days. We can feel other people's joys, pains, and sorrows as if they're our own. So let's make sure that we make a distinction between which energies in life represent our own energies and which of those energies are actually coming from other people, so that we don't get sucked into their vibrations. With Neptune in Pisces, there's going to be a growing expression of our psychic ability, our intuitive nature, spiritual growth, and this is a powerful time for accelerated connection with the music of the spheres. And we see that happening with how strong an expression sound healing has become. I mean, there's so many experiences of sound healing with gongs and didgeridoo and vocal harmonics, and people are really getting in touch with the power of sound as a transformational force. And we see that sound is a powerful force in the process of creation through the creation story. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And that all things were created by the Word. And the Word is at resonance with sound. So the universe was brought into being by virtue of sound, as we bring our human realities into being by virtue of sound also. So it's a very powerful time for going deeper into the experience of using sound and music as a force for healing. And Neptune in Pisces is helping us to accomplish that. And then Uranus now is in the sign of Aries until March of 2019. And this is the elevation of our human identity. Aries is symbolic of our human identity. The way that we identify ourselves. With Uranus, a planet that represents the higher mind, we are charged to take our identity to a higher resonance of expression now. So the elevation of our human identity. Uranus is the planet of brotherhood and sisterhood, and so there's this expansion going on relative to the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, the importance of recognizing all beings as being your own self by extension, and moving into the all-inclusiveness of life and reality and being, the oneness of the wholeness. That Uranus in Aries is saying, pay attention to the oneness of the wholeness of being. For example, when we look at what the opposite sign of Aries is, we see that it's Libra. Now, Aries represents the will of self. Libra represents the will of others. But then on the grandest scale, Libra represents the will of God. And so with Uranus in Aries, it is helping to trigger a resonance connection to the opposite sign, because Uranus in its highest light expression is always bringing the resonance of brotherhood and sisterhood and relationship connectedness. In this particular case, it's recognizing the way that the individual self is connected to the universal self, and that over and above having an individuality, we have a unividuality, or a universal selfhood, which is greatly available during these times. So above and beyond there being 12 signs, there are 6 pairs of signs that come together to reveal one another to each other. Libra is the opposite sign of Aries. Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus. Sagittarius is the opposite sign of Gemini. And Capricorn is the opposite sign of Cancer. Leo is the opposite sign of Aquarius. Virgo is the opposite sign of Pisces. So whatever your astrological sign might happen to be, you must own that opposite sign, because that represents the opposite side of your nature. For example, when we consider the Aries and the Aries and Libra configuration, the negatives in Aries are canceled out by the positives in Libra, as the negatives in Libra are canceled out by the positives in Aries. So we really need to have that dance of those opposite signs. So pay attention to the opposite side of your nature reflected through the opposite of your sun sign. So that's a little bit of astrological information for you. Again, I am Astarius Miraculii. Oh, actually, before I get into all of that, let me offer this tone of balance and healing for Neptune in Pisces and Uranus in Aries. right. So if you like the information that you have heard, I really invite you to share it forward, share it with your beloved, share it with as many people as you possibly can that you feel would benefit from this information. And my website is astarius.com. That's www.astarius.com. And you can get a lot more information through my website. Hear sound clips on my CDs. I am a sound healer. I have a number of CDs. And of course, many of you know a lot of other YouTube videos as well. And I feel so grateful that I had the presence of mind to offer this information from an astrological perspective, because this is the first time that I have shared this part of me via video, and I will continue to do so and bring forward the information. Also want you to know that I am available for personal astrological readings. I'm actually a psychic astrologer because I use some other modalities along with my astrology, and I do amazing work by phone or by Skype and those kind of things, so you don't have to be in close proximity. But just for the record, I am located in the Los Angeles area. If you happen to be, you know, in Los Angeles or Southern California, then certainly you might want to come and have a personal reading. It would be my honor to read for you. I'll put all of that information on a CD, so aside from the live session, you can take it with you and hear it again. I love you so much. I champion you, and remember that you are the divine resonance of being, and it's time to own all of who you are. No more renting with option to buy. And again, that site is astarius.com, astarius.com. Aho, ashe, amen, namaste, hotep, in Lakesh, alak in.